Hi everybody, it's Kelly again with Homesteading Hints, and today we are going to talk about different ways to control weeds, more organic ways I guess you'd say. I'm not much into using chemicals. We try to stay away from that, especially around our vegetable garden. A little bit more lenient with the flower beds and things like that, but we still try and do most things as organic as we can, as natural, because we have issues with trying not to kill bees and other pollinating insects, and just trying to make it a little bit more well-rounded thing for nature. We try not to get the you can kill the bumblebees with it, you can kill the honeybees with it. If you're not careful with any of these chemicals, even if you're just trying to kill weeds, they can still do damage to some of your bugs, and also things like your worms in the ground. If that stuff seeps in, you can do damage to them as well. So we try and stay as natural as we can. But the first thing I am going to go through is it's a concoction that we made to kill weeds. That's more of an organic, I guess you could say, concoction, or more natural. It doesn't use any of the petroleum type chemicals, things like that. But what it is a mixture of 1 gallon of white distilled vinegar and 1.5 cups of Epsom salt and 2 tablespoons of Dawn dish soap. And it'll kill about anything anything green that it hits. But it is kind of like Roundup in that way, but it's a little bit less harsh. And obviously, at this point, there's not anybody that says that it can cause cancer to you like Roundup can. So we try and stay away from Roundup unless it's an area that we're not going to be frequenting. Say in your driveway or something like that, we might hit Roundup on that. But we used it, we're right here next to the deck, and we used it on these prostrate knotweed is actually the main weed that we used it on. And you can see I just sprayed it yesterday, and I had sprayed it another time before that, but it was a little bit more, it didn't hit it quite as hard. So it got it a lot deeper on this one. It hit the dandelions okay. But I think that it'll work better on a smaller annual. We let our weeds get a little bit away from us here. We pulled all these weeds one time already, and of course now they're back again. And here's one of the cats, and this is T. T is the pain in the butt of mine, but of course she knows that, so that's why she's here. But she is kind of a pain, but harasses the person that really doesn't like her all that well. But I guess she does her job sometimes, so we keep her around. But she's fairly friendly until you try and do things she doesn't want done. Then she gets to be a pain. So we'll get like right now. So okay, and she's gonna come right back. Okay, so anyway, the first thing we're gonna talk about, this is a garden claw, and this is one way that you can control weeds, especially in areas of your garden that you've just planted. So if the soil's still good and soft, and you can get this down in there, you just run it down in and give it a couple of twists, and it'll grab the soil and twist on it, and you can just move it over, and it'll pull up and loosen all the small seeds that just started from any of the weeds. It works real good on softer soil, but once the soil starts getting compacted back down again, settles and everything, it doesn't work quite as well. I have what's called a Warren hoe, and this one you can run both directions. You can push and pull, and Warren hoe is pretty sharp. It's actually really good for especially a nice, actually a solid soil, because it'll cut the roots off right at the top, at the surface. Now it's not going to get down in and pull those roots out, or basically it cuts them off, which means that they can grow back again. But a lot of times I'll use this just because you can, when you shove it through there, you can cut all that down, and it gives your vegetables or flower bed plants a chance to get up and shade out the other plants. So it works a lot better when the plants are a little bit more established and the soil is a little bit more solid. It doesn't work as good in soft soil because you can have a tendency to kind of bury it once you're pushing it forward or pulling it back. And then we have a rogue hoe. This is actually one of my favorites, and it's a real solid one. You can use the edge to cut with, and I do that a lot of times where you can cut or you can hill things up as you're hoeing, or you can use this to just pull through, and it'll rip some of the bigger weeds out that way and cut them off. And you can maintain really good sharpness with it. It's a pretty heavy hoe, and it cuts off a lot of things pretty quick.
It also kind of creates rows because you have
Yeah,
that
you
V
can
on the
do a row
back.
with it if you want to and make it that way, and almost use it like a rake too. But it works really well. This is a stirrup hoe, which can be gone either direction, and it works good actually too on a solid soil like this one, like the Warren hoe, where you can go back and forth with it and it'll cut up everything off. It does a good job of just cutting it off at soil level. You can pull it and go a little bit deeper on it and keep it under the ground just a little bit, but it works better on a little bit better on a softer soil than the Warren hoe does, because you can kind of float it through. So you can cut it maybe a little bit deeper into the softer soil and it'll go underneath and it'll just pop those roots out, and it does pretty well on that. This is an old Japanese hoe with a tilling fork on the other end of it, and this one actually works pretty good. I use it a lot for it's very young weed seed that's just sprouting, because it gets down in deep and you can pull it through, and you can also use it to hill up your plants that are coming up and cut an edge along the edge of it too. So it works pretty good under more soft soil that way. And then the last hoe, which is kind of the most common hoe that I have anyway, is called a paddle hoe. And it's just a regular hoe that you'd go out. You can basically you can chop the bigger weeds off with it. That's probably its easiest use. You know, you can sharpen this up and you can just do a good hack on them and take them out that way. So it works good on some of the more established weeds, some of the bigger weeds that way. And these are some of the hoes that I use now. I'll be honest with you, I don't use any of them all that much because I still have a preference to pulling them. I actually would prefer to pull almost all the weeds because then I can get the feel as to, you know, pulling the entire root out and taking as much of the plant out as possible. And I always am wary of getting too close and taking off one of the plants that I don't want to take off. And if I'm pulling weeds, you know, you can pay a lot closer attention and you're not going to slip up quite as much if you're grabbing and pulling a weed as if you're bringing a hoe through and it happens to hook up on a root of one of your plants that you want to keep and you end up pulling that out or cutting part of that off. You do some damage that way. So I actually still prefer to pull most of the weeds, and probably will for now. Maybe when we get a bit older, we'll figure something out a little bit better. But there's always going to be weeds, and especially where we're at and what we do, we always have plenty of weeds. And I guess if people, you know, have issue with that, they probably don't want to come visit us too much, but we're okay with that usually. So we deal with the weeds the best we can and try and keep them under control, but we also understand that there are going to be weeds, especially when you have 4 acres, you have large garden area, large fruit tree area, all that stuff, that you're always going to have weeds that are going to get out of hand, and they have really gotten out of hand in the last couple of weeks with the rains we got, and now we got some heat again and all that stuff. They are going like gangbusters, and so we're trying to catch back up on weeds again. We do a lot of mowing, just mowing the weeds off too, and I suppose that's probably the second way we keep them under control, is just a weed eater and mowing along the edge of our garden and in between the rows, you know, where we have the grass and all that stuff, because it's going to keep those weeds down. You get in close there and you keep that cut down and you keep the definition in there, and any weeds encroaching on the edge, then you come back through and you can either weed eat them or pull them up that way, and anything just growing in our garden area can be taken care of by pulling it up. So it works out pretty well for us. I will say too, on a different note with weeds, and I'm trying to be a little bit wary of it right now, because the Japanese beetles are just starting to show up, and they will annihilate everything that they like to eat, which can be a lot. I mean, a lot of your garden plants, as well as a lot of flowers, roses, things like that too. They have a preference for certain weeds, and I have actually left certain weeds as like a bait for them. And I can't remember the name of the weed. When we're going to do one in a couple of weeks on Japanese beetles, I will show you the weed then. And there's a couple other weeds that they will eat in preference even over our garden produce, which is perfect for me. So some of those weeds I'm actually leaving as bait and as a host plant for them to, you know, I'll actually go out every day and knock a bunch off into a bucket of water, and dump those to the chickens every day to just try and keep the Japanese beetles from getting into some of our vegetables and our produce that way. So weeds are not all bad. And remember one thing, if there aren't weeds there, the only target that every pest, insect, or rabbit or deer has is your garden produce. So if you don't have any weeds there, that just gives them more focus on your garden. So it's not always a bad thing, especially around the perimeter of your garden or the perimeter of your yard, to have something else for them to chew on, the pests, before they get there. And it's also a good place for bugs to, some of your beneficial bugs, the kinds like the wasps and things like that like to eat your pest insects. They can lay their eggs and they can live there and start out there before they grow into the adults that will take out your other insects, even ladybugs, things like that. So diversity is always good, even if it is weeds. Sometimes they can help you that way. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, give Ted Lare a call, and we'll try and help you out that way. Until next week, have fun, everybody. Thanks.